This citizen, Stephen Kushner, finds himself hitchhiking on a desolate road in Middle America, his blistered feet rubbing raw against his tattered shoe leather, the pain keeping his exhausted frame awake, for he knows that if he stops moving, the cold will quickly consume him. He has no memory of the past events that put him into such circumstances, and is genuinely terrified of what future events may lay ahead. In the distance, he sees the dim lights of a vehicle approaching through the fine mist of his strained breath. He desperately wants to be picked up, to get out of the bitter cold, and to rest his poor, aching feet, but he doesn't hold much confidence in success. The last few cars rattle past him, only one acknowledging his existence with an ear-piercing blast of their horn. This time, however, was different. The truck was slowing, and eventually ground to a halt when it pulled alongside him. "Not a kind night to be out for a stroll," the deep male voice from the truck called. "No choice, I'm afraid," Stephen croaked back, squinting to make out the figure within. "I'm completely lost, and I have no idea where I'm headed." "Jump in then," the man was quick to offer. "The homestead's not far off the road ahead, and I'll give you a warm bed and supper in return for some labor." Stephen was shaken. This was exactly what he'd been wishing for, but his gut clawed at him not to commit. "Quickly then," the man boomed again, giving Stephen no time to think it through. Too cold and too rushed to think clearly, he stepped forward. "Thank you, sir. Thank you." "The name's Tom, and don't mention it. It'd be good to have some company. My wife has been on a serious cognitive decline as of late." Hearing this didn't make him feel any better, and he stayed close to his side of the cab for the duration of the ride to the farmhouse. It was a run-down old place, exactly what Steve had expected. A barn to one side, silos next to that, and other ramshackle lean-tos and half-attempted hen houses varying in states of decay scattered around. Harder to make out in the moonlight was a huge shed behind the farmhouse. Stepping out of the car, the dull odor of a piggery intensified immediately, and he pulled his scarf over his nose and mouth in an attempt to filter it out. "Don't mind the smell," the farmer started. "I can assure you, you don't smell much better." Stephen didn't disagree. He knew he must reek from being on the road for God knows how long, and even longer since he could remember his last bath. Upon entering the house, the farmer directed Steve to take a seat in the dining room while he went to the kitchen to fetch his wife and reheat some leftover stew. The dining room was dimly lit, and he scanned around the room at the unsettling and eerie choice of decorations. While looking about, he overheard the farmer talking to what he assumed was his wife in the kitchen. He couldn't make out exactly what they were saying, but sentences along the lines of, "I've found someone," and "he should do nicely," genuinely made him want to flee. But he was so hungry that he figured he would eat first and could fight off the old farmer if need be. Moments later, the farmer entered the room along with a large pot and an old frail lady by his side. She held herself close to him, for it was clear that she was completely blind. Introductions were made, and dinner was served. Steve was famished, and he quickly tucked into the hot stew to quell his hunger pangs and to thaw out his frozen bones. Within minutes, Steve was finished. However, his feelings of satisfaction were short-lived as he began to feel dizzy, and he watched the couple in front of him slowly blur away into darkness. "It's time," barked the farmer. Hours had passed, and Steve found himself in yet another completely unfamiliar setting. He was on a couch in what was perhaps the living room? "What?" he croaked. Time for what?" "Feeding time," the farmer replied. "Come with me." Steve, still feeling extremely groggy, pulled himself to his feet and followed the farmer outside. "You passed out pretty swiftly last night," the farmer began. "Thought you might be ill, but you slept so soundly, I figured you was just exhausted." "Right," replied Steve. I'm sorry, I really don't know what happened." "It's fine," muttered the farmer. "I would have let you sleep, but you're needed." The farmer slid back the huge steel door to the piggery, and Steve was nearly knocked off his feet by the incredible stench. "Dear God," he coughed. "Ain't no God here," the farmer quipped. "These beasts be Satan's finest." Steve then reeled back at the sight of hundreds of massive, overgrown hogs stretching far into the darkness. The pens packed to capacity, and the deafening sound of the grunting and squealing assaulted his eardrums with the power of an avalanche. "It's feeding time," the farmer boomed. "They know when they see me, they're about to get fed." Stephen froze. "What do they eat?" he asked. "Anything," the farmer shot back. "Anything at all. They'll carve through an entire cow in minutes if I was to let them have it one." "Is that what you feed them?" Stephen cautiously inquired, not sure he was going to like the answer. "Ha! Nothing that big. Have to settle with corn and grain," he grunted as he pulled a lever which opened chutes around the shed, allowing the feed to cascade into each pen, amplifying the already ear-splitting ambience tenfold. Steve watched on in awe as the pigs scrambled over each other in order to fill their greedy guts with no regard for any other. "Have to ration it though," the farmer quipped as he shut the lever off. "The supply is running low, and I can't afford to be greedy." The vision quickly made his mind flash back to when the rich and powerful were being selected for a berth on the Soteria. Men, women, and children were trampled, beaten, and shot in order to remove them from the chosen ones and allow openings for others. The true colors of the worst of all human beings had been revealed, and sadly, only the absolute worst had managed to make their way onto the ship, the select few who were now the future of the human race. And Stephen was one of them. Steve then spent the next few weeks working in return for food and shelter. The farmer explained how the farm had really fallen on tough times and wasn't sure how much longer he could keep it going. Steve said he was happy to stay around as long as he was needed. He had grown less paranoid of the farmer's intentions for him and was finding it easier to relax when alone. That was until he was visited one afternoon by a large, imposing man who appeared to have just wandered onto the property. At first, his features were hard to make out. That was until he stepped into the light, and a shock of panic ran through Steve's veins as he realized the man's eyes were weeping blood. "Stop right there," Steve snapped. This is private property. You need to leave." "I'm no threat," the man calmly replied back. "In fact, I'm here to warn you," he whispered. "The old couple are planning to feed you to the pigs." "What?" Steve hurled back at him. That's ridiculous. They like having me here. I'm helping them out." "You sure are. I mean, you sure will." Steve wanted to beat the man over the head with his shovel, but deep down he knew he was right. He knew they were plotting his end. The man smiled at Steve and spoke sternly. "Look, the name is Blacker, and I'm just here to warn you. Get out of here. Join me. I'll take you to a better place." Steve stared deep into the man's eyes and was about to speak when he was cut off by the old farmer calling out for him. Steve turned and called out, and when he turned back, the man was gone. Steve then questioning if he was even real. That night, at a time where Steve would normally be fast asleep, he lay in bed wide awake due to the trauma caused by the unpleasant encounter he had experienced earlier in the day. It was then he began to overhear the conversation between the old couple downstairs. He could only make out portions of it, but it was clear they were planning something for him when he heard his name referenced in the same sentence as, "It's time," and "I'll take care of it tomorrow." Steve didn't sleep a wink that night, on high alert for what was to come. The next morning, he rose as usual, before sunrise, and was greeted outside by the farmer who suggested that they both go and feed the pigs first thing in the morning. Are you sure you don't want me to go and fill the water truck for them first?" Steve inquired, as that was generally his first task of the day, one he would do alone. "Nope," the farmer shot back. "Need you in the piggery, now." Steve reluctantly agreed, and they entered the large steel shed with the farmer leading the way. The air was more rancid than usual, and Steve began to shake, unable to fully deal with what he knew was about to happen. "The grain ran out yesterday," the farmer started. "I can't afford any more until I get these pigs to market in a fortnight, and they'll die before then. So we have to make a sacrifice." As the words left his lips, the farmer drew a large knife from his belt and moved it forward. Steve instinctively swatted it with his hand and it scuttled across the floor below. "What the hell are you doing?" snapped the farmer. "Getting in first," hurled back Steve as he pushed the old man over the edge and into the churning mass of the bloodthirsty pigs. The entire shed erupted with a cacophony of squealing as the farmer was torn to shreds, completely disappearing from view in a matter of seconds. Steve stood on the edge of the pen and stared down into the madness, his deep breath heaving through the clenched teeth of his manic smile. It was time to go. Stepping back into the house to pick up the keys to the truck, the old lady called out to who she thought was her husband from the living room. "Did it go okay, Tom?" Steve didn't reply. "Did he have the stomach to help you kill a few hogs for feed?" "I sure hope so. We'll show he's got what it takes to keep this place going when we're gone." Steve froze. The guilty regret of what he'd just done hit him like an icy blast. They were going to kill some pigs, to feed them to the pigs. They were going to gift him the farm. He rapidly backed out of the house in an attempt to avoid the horrific realization hitting home any harder. Shaking like a leaf, he started the truck, where he noticed Blacker was waiting for him. "You made me kill an innocent man," Steve barked. "I didn't know," Blacker calmly replied. "I do know that you're a murderer, though." "You can't tell anyone," Steve begged. "It's fine," Blacker assured him. "Stick with me and do what I say, and you'll have nothing to worry about." Back on the ship, it was noted that Steve's cognitive state had been altered, and he would have to be monitored closely to prevent any further brain damage. And in a pod, right next to his, Dan Blacker smiled, as he had now successfully recruited a lackey.